The first time I realized the HOA had started using my private garage, I wasn't even home. My neighbor sent me a picture, a grainy, half-tilted shot from her second-story window, showing a bunch of strangers in neon vests unloading folding chairs, banners, and something that looked suspiciously like a cotton candy machine into my garage. My garage. The one I locked every night. The one I use for my woodworking projects. The one with a motion sensor camera I'd installed after some package thefts last year. And there they were, community volunteers and one of the board members, acting like they were setting up for a block party in my personal space. At first, I laughed, because what else do you do when you see photographic evidence that your HOA has apparently annexed your property, like it's the damn Sudetenland? Then the camera notification on my phone buzzed again. The live feed opened to a shaky shot of the HOA president, Melissa, pushing her sunglasses up with one manicured finger while barking orders like a low-rent movie director. No. Keep the extension cords tidy. If we blow another fuse, the whole event gets delayed again, she said. Her voice had that brittle tone of someone who's been in charge too long, without earning it. Behind her, one of her cronies pulled open my cabinet drawers looking for outlets. I watched for a minute, dumbfounded, before calling her. She answered on the second ring, cheerful as a morning radio host. Oh, hey, Jason. I was actually to call you later, she started. You're my garage. I interrupted. There was a pause, followed by a quick inhale. Technically, the HOA has temporary use of common access facilities. Melissa, I said, keeping my voice even, it's on my deed, not common property, not HOA maintained. Mine. She let out a nervous laugh. Well, sure, but we assumed you want to support the Community Fund Day. You're usually so accommodating. We're just storing some supplies for the event tomorrow. We'll be out by morning. That word, assumed, hung in the air like smoke. Melissa, I said, you assumed wrong. I want everything out of there in the next hour, or I'll start charging rent. Her tone snapped cold. Jason, there's no need to be confrontational. This is for the good of the neighborhood. You wouldn't want to seem uncooperative. There was the HOA threat dressed up in politeness. I smiled even though she couldn't see it. Melissa, if my garage isn't cleared in an hour, I'm sending the footage to the HOA's legal email and copying my lawyer. She scoffed. You're overreacting. I ended the call, still watching the live feed. For a few minutes, nobody moved. Then, like a disturbed anthill, they all started shuffling and packing up their boxes. Within 45 minutes, the place was empty again, except for a few plastic wrappers and one forgotten folding table. I should have let it go there. But curiosity got the better of me. When I opened the garage door later that evening, I noticed something odd. The lock was scratched up like someone had tried to pick it or force it open before realizing I had cameras. That told me two things. One, this wasn't their first attempt, and two, Melissa was lying to her capped teeth about this being temporary. The next day, during the event, I stopped by the park out of sheer morbid fascination. It looked exactly as chaotic as you'd expect from an HOA function. Kids screaming, overcooked hot dogs, and Melissa pacing around like she was managing Coachella. When she spotted me, her face tightened into a plastic smile. Jason, glad you could make it, she said, clutching a clipboard like it was a weapon. I see the garage furniture made out safely, I said. Her smile twitched. We cleaned everything up just like you asked. Except my lock. She blinked. What? The one someone tried to break. A little color drained from her cheeks. Oh, that must have been one of the volunteers misunderstanding the layout. You know how these things happen. Sure, I said. If by misunderstanding you mean felony trespass. The conversation ended there, but I caught her shooting daggers at me for the rest of the day. That night, I decided to check the footage again, just in case. And there it was, time-stamped 2 nights before the event, 11:43 p.m. A man in a hoodie and gloves fiddling with my lock. The camera didn't catch his face clearly, but the height, build, and distinct walk told me enough. It was Greg, Melissa's husband. He was a retired contractor, always too eager to volunteer his services around the neighborhood, always hanging around HOA meetings though he wasn't officially on the board. I didn't call the police. Not yet. I wanted to see how far they'd go. The next morning, a letter appeared taped to my door. Official HOA letterhead, of course. It was a friendly reminder that residents were expected to cooperate fully with community initiatives, and that failure to participate constructively may result in review of property privileges. Property privileges. I laughed so hard I spilled my coffee. Instead of replying, I went out and changed the locks on my garage, this time to a smart deadbolt connected directly to my phone. I added 2 more cameras inside, one facing the workbench and another aimed at the ceiling, just in case someone got creative. 2 days later, I caught movement again. Mid-afternoon this time. Melissa herself, standing in my driveway, jiggling the new handle. She looked confused and annoyed, then whipped out her phone to make a call. I could see her lips moving fast, gesturing like she owned the place. 10 minutes later, Greg showed up with a toolbox. I called out from my porch, pretending to be just getting home. "Something wrong, guys?" They both froze like kids caught stealing candy. Melissa's smile was instant, automatic. "Oh, Jason, we were just checking something. One of the neighbors mentioned a noise coming from your garage. We wanted to make sure everything was safe." "Noise?" I said. "From my locked garage?" "Well," she said, eyes flicking Greg. "Maybe it was just the wind." Greg grunted, lowering his toolbox. "Thought I could tighten up that handle for you." "I think I've got covered," I said. "And next time you hear a noise from my property, you can call the police like normal people." They both stared at me, then muttered some excuse about concern for community safety before walking off, visibly frustrated. I thought that was the end of it. But the following week, I came home to find a printed notice in my mailbox stating that I was in violation of the HOA's shared use policies for denying access to maintenance facilities. Apparently, Melissa had decided my private garage now qualified as community storage space under some obscure bylaw about shared structures adjacent to easements. That night, I poured myself a whiskey, sat at my desk, and started reading the HOA bylaws line by line. Took me 3 hours, but by the end I'd highlighted 14 instances of language that directly contradicted her claim. I also found an interesting clause. Any unauthorized entry into private property could result in immediate removal from the HOA board pending investigation. I knew then that I wasn't just going to stop them. I was going to make them regret ever touching that garage. The next morning, I filed a formal complaint with the HOA attorney, copying the board, my insurance company, and the local sheriff office. And then, just a good measure, I added a short note at the end. Since there seems to be confusion about access permissions, the garage will remain locked until further notice. Any entry attempt will be treated as trespassing. The board's response came 2 hours later, an email filled with fake courtesy and thinly veiled panic. They'd look into it, they said. They wanted to resolve this amicably, but I'd already made my plans. 2 days later, I loaded my car, locked the garage, and left town for a week. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I just drove out, hit the highway, and turned off my phone camera alerts halfway through the drive. I figured I'd let the silence do the talking. By the time I came back, I had 3 missed calls from Melissa, 2 HOA emails marked urgent, and 1 police voicemail that began with, "Mr. Avery, we'd like to speak with you about an incident involving your garage." Whatever happened while I was gone, it wasn't just petty anymore. When I pulled into my driveway a week later, the first thing I noticed was the silence. That heavy, suspicious kind of silence where everything looks just slightly too neat, too organized, like a stage set waiting for the next scene. The grass on my lawn had been trimmed perfectly, even though I hadn't scheduled the landscapers. The HOA sign at the end of the cul-de-sac gleamed like it had just been power washed. And then I saw it, my garage door. The bottom panel was dented in faintly, like someone had tried to pry it open with a crowbar and realized halfway through that it wasn't going to end well. I didn't even bother going inside right away. I just stood there, engine still running, one hand gripping the steering wheel while my brain processed the sheer audacity of it. Someone had tried to break in. Again. When I finally got out, and unlocked the side door. The smell hit first. Stale, chemical, and faintly sweet, like spilled soda mixed with paint thinner. Then I saw the mess. Tables overturned, a shattered work light on the floor, an entire stack of my woodworking boards missing. My heart dropped into my stomach. Those boards weren't just lumber. They were months of work, rare walnut pieces I'd been saving for a custom build. Gone. The cameras, I thought. The cameras will tell me everything. I sprinted inside, connected my phone to the feed, and froze. Every single one of the garage cameras had been unplugged, not just turned off. Unplugged and neatly coiled like someone wanted to make sure I knew they were done deliberately. That was when I noticed a letter sitting on my workbench, folded neatly in half and sealed with blue tape like some kind of mocking apology. The HOA letterhead. Of course. Dear Mr. Avery, it began, due to your failure to comply with community access standards and your obstruction of scheduled maintenance activities, the HOA board authorized temporary entry to your garage for safety inspection and event equipment retrieval. Unfortunately, an incident occurred resulting in property disturbance. We regret any inconvenience caused and have arranged for a contractor to repair minor damage to your garage door. We look forward to resolving this matter constructively. There was no signature, no name, just the board. I stood there in that ruined garage for a long minute, trying to decide whether I was angry or impressed. They'd managed to make breaking and entering sound like a friendly community service. I called the police first. The responding officer, a young guy with an apologetic expression, looked over the damage and sighed. Technically, if they're listed as authorized community representatives, he started. They're not. I cut in. The garage isn't community property. It's on my deed. I have footage from the last attempt to prove they've done this before. He nodded slowly, taking notes. I'll file a report, but you'll probably want to handle this civilly first. HOAs can get messy when lawyers get involved. I almost laughed. Yeah, messy's an understatement. After he left, I drove straight to the HOA office, a converted model home on the other side of the subdivision. Melissa's SUV was parked out front, gleaming like a trophy. I walked in without knocking. She was inside, talking to Greg and another board member, Cheryl, the type who wore permanent disapproval like perfume. Melissa's smile faltered when she saw me. "Jason," she said, her voice tight. "You're back." "You broke into my garage," I said. No greeting, no preamble, just truth. She straightened her papers. "That's an unfair characterization. The board authorized a safety inspection after multiple complaints about chemical odors coming from your property." "Complaints?" I asked. "From who?" Greg cleared his throat. Several neighbors mentioned. I turned to him. "You mean you and Melissa?" Melissa's jaw tightened. "Jason, I know you're upset, but this hostility isn't helping anyone. We needed access. You weren't responding. We couldn't just ignore a potential hazard." "A hazard?" I repeated. "You mean my hobby?" My seal would varnish. Cheryl chimed in, her tone syrupy. "You have to understand, when you refuse cooperation, it creates tension in the community. We all share responsibility for maintaining harmony." Harmony. That word landed like a punchline. "Funny," I said. "Harmony must have been the reason someone unplugged my cameras and stole half my lumber." For the first time, Melissa's composure cracked. "That's a serious accusation." "So is trespassing," I said. "But don't worry, the police have the report." Greg shifted uneasily. "You called the cops?" "Yep," I said, smiling. "And next, I'm calling my lawyer. So if you or your board want to keep inspecting my property, make sure you bring a warrant." I left before they could answer. By that evening, the neighborhood group chat was lighting up like wildfire. People asking if it was true that the HOA had broken into my garage. Others defending Melissa, saying I'd overreacted. The gossip split the community right down the middle. 2 days later, things escalated. I woke up to find an official notice taped to my front door again, this time thicker, stapled, and stamped. Notice of fine. Apparently, I now owed $2,500 for non-compliance with maintenance inspections and obstruction of community initiatives. Failure to pay within 10 days would result in property lien proceedings. That was it. I called my lawyer, an old college friend named Marcus who'd made a career out of defending people from HOA madness. When I told him what had happened, he just laughed. "Oh, they're dead. Send me every document, photo, and recording you've got. Don't talk to them again directly." I sent everything, the photos, the police report, the letter. Then I did something that even surprised me. I called my insurance company and told them my garage had been vandalized. The adjuster came out the next day, took one look, and asked, "Do you know who did it?" "Yeah," I said. "The Homeowners Association." She blinked. "That's a new one." The claim went through fast. Apparently they'd seen enough HOA nonsense to not even question it. I used the payout to repair the garage, reinforce the door, and install industrial-grade locks that could stop a bear. But that wasn't the part that mattered. What mattered was the letter I sent afterward. It was short, just 3 sentences. "Dear Board, any future access to my property will require written authorization signed by both parties and notarized. Failure to comply will result in immediate legal action and public disclosure of your ongoing violations. Consider this your only warning." I knew Melissa would take it as a challenge. She couldn't resist being in control. And sure enough, 3 days later, I got another email from her. "Jason, we'd like to discuss your tone. The board is considering mediation before this escalates further." I didn't reply. Instead, I made my next move. That weekend, while everyone was busy with their HOA garden beautification day, I quietly listed my garage on a peer-to-peer storage platform legally. I rented it out to a local contractor who needed extra space for his equipment. A legitimate business arrangement, perfectly within zoning and HOA rules. The next morning, his crew arrived with trucks and gear, filling the garage from wall to wall. They even installed a keypad entry system. By noon, Melissa was at my door, arms crossed. "You can't do this," she said. "Do what?" "Rent your garage. It violates." "Actually," I said, holding up a printed copy of the bylaws, "it doesn't. Section 8, Paragraph 2. Private property use for non-residential storage is permitted as long as it doesn't generate noise, traffic, or waste. You wrote that rule, remember?" Her face turned a shade of pink I hadn't seen before. "You're exploiting a loophole." "Just following community standards," I said, "like you told me to." She sputtered for a second, then marched off muttering about calling an emergency board meeting. That night, I checked the cameras again. Everything looked fine until around 11:15 p.m., when motion triggered the side feed. Someone was walking around the garage again, flashlight beam cutting through the dark. This time, I was ready. I called the police before they could even touch the door. When the patrol car pulled up, the intruder froze mid-step. It was Greg, again, watching from my window. I saw the officer lead him away, while Melissa came running down the street in a robe, trying to smooth things over. The whole neighborhood saw it. The next morning, my phone rang. It was Marcus, my lawyer, practically giddy. "You've got them, Jason. They violated their own bylaws, your property rights, and now there's a police report. Time to go nuclear." I smiled, leaning back in my chair. "Not yet," I said. "Let them sweat a little first." Because what I had in mind wasn't just revenge, it was education. And by the time I was done, they'd learn exactly what private property really meant.